Hi, Annabel.
Representing again. I know, next time we should switch because you can wear the hoodie next time.
As long as it's not tomorrow, because tomorrow's going to be 30 degrees and that splitting hairs hoodie is the coziest thing I've ever worn.
Okay, so today I've had this topic in mind, but it's multifaceted. And it's
Everything we do is multifaceted.
I know. So let's just riff on this one. It's about recordings, and that alone. I can't give this a proper title because there's so many different things. So, okay, just going off of that. I feel like when we got the technology to record, it was like one of those big bangs in music history, and it's completely changed the way we can do anything. So that's the perspective of the student listening to recordings or a professional or anything like that. So my first thing is, should students should they listen to recordings when they're learning any repertoire?
Well, seeing as I'm the teacher in this situation, let me respond by saying yes. But let me also say, I used to not think so. I used to think completely the opposite of how I think now, which is bizarre because that doesn't usually happen to me. So I used to think everything you needed was on the page, which some people... everything you need is on the page if you understand a lot about the composer's time and how they used to play things. So we've talked about this a lot, so we won't get into this. Check out other episodes, historically informed stuff and all of that. But now I believe that if you don't know anything about the music and you're just staring at the page, which is often what happens, students come to a piece of music and they don't understand what the articulation should be like, or that the dynamics aren't necessarily biblical, then listen to a recording, yes. So to answer in short, I believe that one should listen to recordings to learn their music, yes.
Isn't it a shortcut? Isn't it a gigantic shortcut to learn music?
Okay, why should it be a long way round to get to learn a piece?
I think if you're a student, you
should waste a lot of time. Yeah, you do that by going to bars and drinking and having fun. That's where you should waste your time.
If you're a student and you're currently learning whatever piece, I think, and it's happened to me, I think if you listen to recordings maybe too early while you're learning this piece, whatever it is, it's going to hinder you. I think it's going to hinder you.
You mean make it harder to learn it?
Yeah.
Why would you think that? That doesn't make any sense to me. Come on, let's go.
Okay, well, my example is, I've got two. I started learning Mozart's Fifth Concerto, and I was like, okay, I want to listen to it first, which can be a good thing because then you get an idea for the tempo and what that is on the page and things like that. And I listened to a Hilary Hahn recording, and I didn't know anything. I didn't know that you'd make that face when I'd say that. Nothing. I was just going, Mozart A major, Concerto No. 5, Hilary Hahn, just is the first one popped on YouTube. And I heard it and I was like, oh my gosh, wow. And then I made this decision because this happened later after other problems with recordings. I stopped listening to it. I listened to no other recording. I learnt the music from the page, discovering for myself where the notes are going in the phrase planning that I had to do whilst learning it from you. And then I went back and I listened to that same recording of Hilary Hahn and I went, oh my gosh, I would never, I can't. What I'd learnt on the page, what the notes were telling me where the phrase was going and things like that, in my opinion, it was very confronting sort of recording. The other story I have was I had spent years listening to one particular recording of the Mendelssohn Concerto, and I knew it in here so much that when I went to learn that piece way too early, I think that helped me being able to learn it because I know this really well. But I remember saying to you, just complete in earnest, oh, well, when can I take this piece faster? And you went, when you play like Joshua Bell. And I was sort of like, what? But that was so naive of me because I thought, well, hold on, this is the recording of the piece. This is the tempo that they're taking it. Therefore, I must take it at that tempo. And it didn't even comprehend in my brain that it's like, no, doesn't have to be. Because you listen to any recording now, any piece, whatever it is, someone might take it really slow or really fast or play it a particular way. And I think it can get in the way of how you learn it and how you can play it otherwise. And Ivry Gitler said this. He said, don't be just a copy of your recordings. So if students are going through the process of learning, you name the piece, any piece. And it's just like, oh, you can tell they listen to Vengerov. But then are you just copying Vengerov? Where's your own playing? We all play the same music. We all learn the same techniques. We're not all the same player. We all have different styles and stuff, but then it takes away from any, is that Annabel playing or is that someone else?
Well, I mean, as usual, you bring up really deep, fundamental, philosophical issues about what it is to be a classical musician.
You're
anyway. Welcome. And here we are. So there's a whole bunch of things that I want to address there. The first thing is, you learnt that Mendelssohn probably the same way that I learnt the last movement, the flute concerto by Mozart on the flute by ear because I was obsessed with it in grade 12. So I got out the flute and I learnt the flute part by ear, not knowing fingerings or anything. I could kind of make a sound, but I was obsessed with this piece so much that I just had to learn it. Now, was I a flautist? No, most certainly not. Did I have some vague talent at it? Yeah, maybe. But I loved the piece so much that I just wanted to play it. And that was possibly how you felt about the Mendelssohn. Without having, say, some of the fundamentals in your technique, that allowed you to play it. So the recording helped you, absolutely, 100% helped you. But in a way, it hindered you because your goal was so far away from where you were at the time of learning it. This happened to me also with the Saint-Saëns third concerto. I learned that in grade 12. I was obsessed with it, but I didn't have any of the fundamentals to be able to perform it. Probably Elgar concerto was a bit the same.
Ambitious students.
But we shouldn't stop. We shouldn't stop that. But some really strict, methodical teachers won't allow you to play certain pieces until you've reached a certain level. I'm the opposite of that because I often deal with sort of kind of damage control. I'm in damage control with my students. They're needing to do something fast. So I often have to come across like anyone can play anything and you can get there in 6 weeks. So my philosophy is it has to be like that. That's not to say it's true for everybody. Some people do need psychologically to take the long way around. And the long way around might be putting the recording away and going back to basics like you're saying, meticulously doing the repetition, doing the 1,000 hours, doing all of that stuff, because otherwise you'll feel like you haven't put enough work in and you won't feel self-confident enough to play it. The third thing I want to say is when you talk about Ivry Gitler and Hilary Hahn in the same room, breath, sentence, day, you couldn't pick two more different violinists with more different philosophies than those two human beings. To copy Hilary Hahn is admirable. She's absolutely a machine.
She's impeccable.
Impeccably rhythmic, impeccably structured and built up. Her technique, you cannot fault it. Ivry Gitler, on the other hand, is like a cowboy renegade who did whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, however he wanted. And he represents his own age because there's probably a few decades difference in age between Ivry Gitler. And in Ivry Gitler's day, the individual violinist was upheld. But now with the internet age, copying is held up much more, aspiring to the influencers, the makeup tutorials, all of that sort of stuff. And the same thing is in our industry where students obsess about things and they want to copy. I still think that's okay.
Is this a greater problem then?
I don't think
we've spoken in the Anne Sophie phenomenon, which were those soloists that are still around that have that belief, and how do I say this nicely? Because this was your episode that you wanted to talk about. But this sort of individuality to the point of, remember, it's the composer's music. but we are showing off the incredible technique of someone that can play it impeccably.
Yeah.
And then there's now this copying generation, which is kind of a really sad thing to think about, because you've got these students that are like, okay, we've highlighted in the past century the incredible giants of the violin playing world, and we're trying to be like them. Why? And then it's, I don't know, I can't speak for other people if they think that's a good or bad thing. Do you want to be like Hilary Hahn, or do you want to be your own person? Or...
Well, I want to be like Hilary Hahn for Earl King and all that stuff post
Glasnost,
turn of last century.
Her Glasnost and Izai is just...
I want that. But somehow to get that, you have to abandon the idea of freedom and phrasing and early music concepts and decay and different equipment, different instruments. So you have to abandon that to become that. But I don't think you have to have just one or the other. I think as long as you're consciously practicing this way for Bach, this way for Paganini, why can't we be skillful at all these different genres of music, understanding that there are differences between those genres of music?
Well, when we go to do violin exams, you have to do your theory and oral component, and one of the things is sight reading. Is this going to hinder our sight reading abilities? Because sometimes, and you do this when you play new music, is when you, and I've got this right now, I've got a concert in 3 weeks, and there's no recording of those music. That's the part. So I have to sit there and I have to, write out some of the rhythms, because it's all tied and syncopated stuff, and there's no recording for me to go, what does this sound like? So it has to come down to my musical ability to figure out how to play this.
Yes.
And with your commissions, no one's played that music before. You premiered those works. There was no recording for you to run to kind of, or how did it sound?
Yeah.
So I think it's going to hinder some abilities. And I think...
absolutely.
Yeah, so that's why I do think recordings, it's such a incredible double-edged sword.
Yeah, definitely.
I think you should go and learn the piece, learn it from your teacher if you're the teacher, and then just before you go to that, performing that last 10% of putting it together, go listen to multiple recordings and see how other people play it, and then you have to sort of go from there. And I can't tell people to play like that or play like that.
I'd go a step further actually. I'd listen to a lot of different kinds of recordings of the same piece, because that's just interesting anyway. Like if you listen to Vivaldi Four Seasons with Josh Bell, or who comes to James Ennis, and then you listen to Reinhard Goebel, or the early music guys. Maybe Four Seasons isn't a good example, because people, all types of violinists, know that you can take liberties in the Four Seasons. There's this weird idea that the Four Seasons is an opportunity to be completely radical about how you play music.
But I've heard good radical, and I will absolutely link it. There's the Denmark Bach Society or something, but in Amsterdam or something. But it's just like this soloist did the Four Seasons, and he did it, I can't explain it, he changed the rhythms and stuff on it, but it was amazing, and he did cadenzas in it and stuff. But you look at that and it's like, I reckon that's historically accurate.
Yeah, but I mean, besides whether it's historically accurate or not, haven't people heard Four Seasons enough? It's a little bit of a really? And also many times... Yeah. But how many times do we have to hear it reimagined before we start getting sick of the basic concept of the Four Seasons, which is really overdone, in my opinion? There's a lot more music that Vivaldi wrote that are in drawers. Wouldn't it be refreshing to hear the language of Vivaldi, but in a different order of notes that doesn't go like dun 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 da da da. It also reminds me of wedding gigs that I used to do. So you're right. I've had a really excessive experience of Four Seasons. But what I wanted to say about a big complaint that people have about universities or music schools is that they're teaching kids to play solo, and they're not teaching them the skills to be orchestral musicians and all that. And I actually agree with that. So they're teaching... lots of really difficult repertoire, especially by your final year. You're sort of expected to have a kind of standard, and people are pushed to do concertos and so on. But the only time, if you're an orchestral musician, the only time you need a concerto is if you're going in this country, in this city, Melbourne, is when you're going for a principal job and you need a big romantic concerto. And usually if you go for those jobs, you'll just kind of pull one out that you did as a student. So unless you are being groomed to be a soloist, which usually happens when you're a teenager, chances are you probably won't be a soloist. Now, that I can't speak for everyone. I sit next to some amazing soloists in my section. They secretly go about playing the Mendelssohn. They'll sneak off to Brisbane and play the Mendelssohn Concerto, not tell anybody, or they'll do something with Stonington, Elgar Cello Concerto, or there are people in the orchestra who pop off and play concertos, but they don't tell anyone that they're doing it. So they're absolutely more than competent, but they just don't want anyone to come, just in case they don't know how to do it anymore. But to bring it back to whether we should listen to recordings or not, if we have to mimic a certain genre that has been established, then there has to be some kind of external learning. In every other genre throughout history, before the 20th century, basically professions were passed down from parents to children. So you're copying, you're learning before you can even speak. You're watching, you're listening.
Well, that's the Suzuki method. It's a year or so or longer.
Absolutely.
Of oral.
And copying.
And I did Suzuki so much that I could play, dictate really, really, really well. But I struggled when I was younger to read sheet music. And that's one of the criticisms of Suzuki, is you learn it by ear, and I can learn by ear really, really well. But when I was younger, I had to spend a good, I don't know how long, fixing up how to read music. Yeah,
so reading wasn't that, didn't come that naturally to you. Yeah, so it would take you longer to learn something, therefore listening to it does really help a person like you.
Yeah, but this was years ago, and obviously that's been all.
Yeah, but years ago is you now. Like, everything that's happened to you years ago makes who you are today. Yeah. So if you haven't had 10,000 wedding receptions that your friends are so bored with playing the standard repertoire that they say, let's bring Beethoven's Razumovsky quartet and play through. If you're not up for that, if you don't do that when you're in the university years, see, that's not valued by some of the old school teachers. They think you should just be doing nothing but practicing your concertos. But that doesn't make you a good team player. That doesn't make you a good chamber music player.
For a year and they don't
and some keep you on the
metronome.
Yeah,
give you just
long
studies.
tones. Yeah, exactly.
There's so much you can say about teaching styles.
But any one of my students who's watching this knows that I have a secret sort of set of studies weapon that I bring in. If someone's just debilitated by nerves or whatever, I've just got these 7 studies, and I'm like, just 2 bars of this, 3 bars of that. Just do that half page.
I was I've gone through so many weird phases, and you were my teacher for a lot of them. Of this need to play every movement of Bach. I've done a lot of Bach, and I had this in my brain. I need to play through every single movement. I needed to play through every single Kreutzer study, and I got, I think, 3/4 of the way through, and I went, I don't.
No.
But I came to you and I was like, okay, I'm going to play this study that I've been working on. Oh, okay, what is it? Kreutzer 1. Okay, Kreutzer 1. And I think it's crotchet 50 or something.
Yeah, it's really slow, long notes,
I did the entire thing, and you've just sat there and you've just gone, I've never in my life heard someone play through the entire Kreutzer 1, because you normally just give the first 2 lines. I played through the whole thing, and it goes for about 8, 9, 10, whatever minutes of just this. No, I'm still going. This is only the first note. It's
and you know what? Conceptually, it's a fantastic study. It's like a... but I saw an edition the other day where... So this study, if people don't know it, you've got to basically play a down bow for a long time and make it get louder and louder and louder through the first note. Really, and then you've got to do an up bow loud and get softer and softer and softer and softer. But do you know what I saw the other day? I saw an edition which had in the print an up bow at the beginning. That's such an in-joke. Just ignore us, everyone. That's just kind of... Anyway, you'll see what I mean. I saw this one edition, first edition I've ever seen in my life that doesn't start down bow. Let's just solve this problem. This is too hard. Let's just put it on up bow. And that's like, I am that person. I'm like, why bother with this study? You can practice all of this stuff on the music that you're already playing. But that's me, damage control. That's like, come on, we haven't got time.
That's actually a separate
Yeah, that's not about
Separate
recordings,
episodes.
but it is about
But-
copying and listening and...
But back to recordings. Okay, so I do think that if you're one of those students where you've got to spend time really working on the technique and stuff, sometimes shortcuts can be bad, and I think recordings can be bad.
I think you're speaking from personal experience.
Oh, I've
because
just told you my personal experience.
No, I mean to say that you did achieve a significant level through only shortcuts, and then the person gets to that level and then can't get any further without solving the problems.
Well,
But
that
I think
was
you've
years.
basically solved.
Well,
all
I
those
think I have to
problems.
change our bio now because I think it's now former teacher.
Because you're my teacher. Yeah.
No, former teacher and student. Because I haven't.
I know we haven't had lesson for ages.
It's been like 6 or so months. And the last one was just 40 minutes of Mozart. It's like, okay, just don't come back.
But didn't you get the feeling that there was nothing to do?
I know.
It was
good,
done.
It was like.
It's almost like when you can play, it's like, this is boring for me now.
No, well, it was like a sort of a, 6 years or whatever it was, 5. Like, yeah, cool. Okay. Now, I heard this thing, speaking of listening to recordings and learning stuff fast if you don't have the time. And I know that you've spoken about that before. You know, you've got a concert next week or whatever. It's that music. You don't have time. The real world about performing musicians is the concert's that date. The rehearsal is that date.
Yep.
You know the stuff or you don't.
Yep.
So yeah. You can just put on a recording and go, okay, yep, bang, go. Is this concept of, okay, if you're auditioning for orchestras,
Yeah.
I've heard from panelists that, it's recommended that you go listen to the full movement or symphony or ballet with the excerpts from, so you know the context of it. But I've heard someone say, the panel can tell if you haven't listened to recordings, if you've only listened to maybe 2 recordings, and they can tell if you've listened to, and it's recommended like 5 different recordings from different eras, different conductors, all that. So that's quite the extreme of that. I do recommend if you've got an excerpt. I don't know this part in Prokofiev's Cinderella. What's that? Go listen to it. Oh, okay, that's that scene.
Oh, definitely.
Context matters, but is that true when you sit on the panel and there's the screen there and it's like, this person doesn't know the significance of this excerpt. This person really knows what they're doing.
Yeah, I think the difference behind a screen, you can tell if someone's played it a lot, and you can, but you can't tell whether they've played it a lot or just listened to a recording a lot, because actually there's no difference, because people more and more are playing along to learn stuff now. So if you're playing along with a YouTube recording of Berlin Phil, you're really 1 degree of separation from playing along with Berlin Phil. You know what I'm saying? So, like, I feel like I can tell that the person behind the screen has experience, whether that means they've listened to recording over and over, or whether it just means they do have experience. Who knows? But you can tell if someone knows where their note's going. What's happening when that note's long, they're listening out for something else, So you can tell, definitely.
So it's not necessarily people that are auditioning, we can tell if you've listened to recordings, not so much that. We can tell if you know...
If you know what you're playing, yeah. If you know what it means, what the meaning of this scene is, or this sentence, because it's, language, basically. You look like you don't like that answer.
No, it's just
it's
sort of
that
like...
face.
What was the one? It was like just the one of... I'm like this.
I know, and I look kind of sad or
No,
scared.
it looked like I was guilty of something and you were angry.
Guilty. You're guilty of asking too many questions. So, I don't know if you've got any more questions, but look, as usual, our topics are really, really nuanced, and I have changed my mind about recordings. I believe that playing along, not just listening, if you can play along, learn your notes, then try and play along, because then you'll have the sound of the accompaniment. I had a very successful lesson with one of my students the other day. She was playing Salute d'Amour, and she'd bought a backing track with a beautiful piano accompaniment for Salute d'Amour. It was absolutely gorgeous.
Now you're putting accompanists out of business. That's just karaoke.
Yeah, it's actually karaoke. Absolutely.
I did that for my year 12 recital, which was like a 45-minute recital I did from memory.
Yeah,
and
but
I just had to, in my brain, get this, every part of the piano, every part of my violin part in my head.
yeah, but stop. This is not practical to do what I've just said. I had a successful lesson with this girl. She had the accompaniment of Salute de More pre-recorded, which is actually a completely different experience from playing with an accompanist. It's 10,000 times harder because the recording will not adjust to you. So you're basically playing with a click track that has writs and accelerando in it, and that's harder than anything because you don't have a click track on top.
And why was
the
it successful then?
Because she absolutely surrendered herself to it without having any body tension, and this was a big victory for her. So I'm not recommending people do that now forever, because it's a totally different experience from playing with another human who is accompanying you and listening and following and expecting you to do the same things. It's a completely different skill. But it was just so amazing that this person had a breakthrough to the point where she could play along with something extremely difficult and not one part of her tensed up. So now she's ready to put a metronome on. And she couldn't do it until that moment.
Because
so it was really interesting.
Destroys things.
Because the metronome can cause extreme body and mind tension.
Blurry.
You're all fuzzy.
I know, this is it's on automatic and it likes to just be like...
There we go. Hold up a lip pencil or something.
There we go.
There you go.
Okay, well, speaking of this is kind of a segue, but some teachers do say to record yourself playing, because then you can hear things that you might not be picking up. So do you recommend recording, rather than maybe listening to final, polished, finished recordings, by incredible soloists, recording your own practice?
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Yep. Yeah, that's it. Short answer, yeah. You can delude yourself a lot. One of the biggest things is don't be deluded in my lessons.
Yeah.
Don't kid yourself. You think you're doing it, you're not doing it enough.
What does the recording pick up?
Well, you can hear what you didn't hear when you were reading the notes, or when you were concentrating on this, or when you were doing a little down talk, I'm so crap speech to yourself in your mind. So you can listen back as if it's someone else. And then you can be, well, it depends what your personality is, but I don't like forcing people to do it if they've got terrible low self-esteem. We'll just sort of work together until they feel physically really great about playing. And then later on they can record themselves. Or if they're really meticulous like you go on with, you get on the bandwagon of things sometimes. Like, that's it, I'm going to record myself every day for 6 days or whatever. Do it if you want to, but it is an awful experience sometimes. I never did it because I was too egocentric. I didn't want to hear the reality. So when I was younger, I didn't do it. But I sort of regret that now, because it lends a bit of an objectiveness to the process, instead of, I know I'm suck, but I'm just going to keep going.
Okay, well, what does it do to a student's mind when they hear a incredibly polished studio recording of the piece that they're learning, and they go, why don't I sound like that?
Oh, this is a great point.
Listen to my playing, and I'm maybe in a practice room or a nice room at the university, and it's like, the big red flag is maybe that's Ray Chen playing and you're not Ray Chen, something like that. But it's like, that's a polished studio recording, no coughing from live people. Maybe, I don't know, have they tidied things up a little bit? Is it a one-hit wonder, one-shot sort of recording, or is that the 15,000th take? I don't know. Like, look at the Two Set Boys are like, they're funny, but and they nail all their little funny bits, right? And they're great violinists, which is why it's funny, because they do all that crazy stuff and then they nail it, right? But I doubt that that's done on the first take.
I've tutored those boys, don't you forget. I've tutored those boys.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're one-take wonders, just quietly.
Like, I think what made them so big and people been drawn to them is because they can play. They're so when they decided to make music jokes and they would do all that crazy stuff, and they'd get it right, it's because they can actually do it, but you'd have to practice in crazy. And then what was that, take 10? And then they get it right. And then it's edited. So what is it if you're that student and you've got Instagram and YouTube at your behest, and it's that person playing like that. And, you know, there's...
Well, yeah. This is a huge problem. Yeah.
Hilary Hahn started this thing called 100 Days of Practice, and she, on Instagram, she would post a video of her practice. Just,
I love that.
30 seconds every day for 100 days, and then she was interviewed after. What did she learn from it? And I think it's a great initiative to get people out there practicing. But then you've got people following, and their Instagram is full of these practice accounts. And then, like social media, you see that, and you see that, and you see the rose-coloured glasses, and you see it sounding good.
Yeah.
And if you're the student that can't even play like that, and maybe they're learning the same piece at you, what do you... Like, now, to be fair, I'm not speaking of experience because I don't do this. I think it's funny to look at, but I don't do it, you know. But I can imagine the mindset of someone that's like, oh, like, you can be encouraged or you can be discouraged.
Yeah, definitely.
That's the reality, whether it's good or bad of that. So...
Oh, but this is the same of any person posting. I saw actually last night a show on young girls wanting plastic surgery because they're just constantly looking at Instagram and people's beautiful Brazilian butt lifts and their tiny waists and people taking ribs out and all that kind of thing. And I felt for these girls, I really did, and then they went through this horrendous surgery. I mean, lucky for us, we're violinists, we don't have to do that much to pretend that we can play. You know, we can do a bit of garage band, put a bit of reverb on, no one's going to get hurt, right? But it's the same phenomenon, isn't it? It's like you're watching everyone else in the way they want to present themselves. Like, just like Facebook. Oh, you know, I'm just so amazing. I've cooked these, you know, handmade donuts and I'm just great and my husband's so fantastic. It's like,
yeah, I mean,
what's going on there.
The joke is Instagram versus reality, which people talk all the time. There's a real, like, psychological phenomenon from social media. This is a completely separate topic, but it's infested.
But it relates. It absolutely relates.
And I think the benefit of technology is it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, of course.
World. So we can record things, but then it's like, I heard that person recording that same concerto, and it's like, it's impeccable.
Yeah. Oh, but to go back to your question, even a live recording... it's like organic food. In the old days, when organic food was being talked about having a certification, there were many groups of people that wanted the certification to be not 100% organic, to have the organic certification, because it's really difficult. Like, if you have an organic farm and you live next to a Monsanto plant or whatever, and if one little germ falls into
your perimeter of what's organic plus stuff around it, because you need to have
the point actually was that the certification of organic is 100%. 100% no chemicals, no fertilizers, no nothing. 100%, right? That's the organic certification. But when you buy an album that says live recording, it's not a live recording. There are edit points in a lot of orchestras all over the world. For it to be considered a live recording, it just has to have less than a certain amount of edit points. So
I didn't know this. I would have thought if it's meant to be a live recording, there have to be at least 8 coughing fits.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But see, that's okay, because that's fine. It's not like anyone's breaking the law or anything. But they say we'll weave together a live recording from 3 concerts. So they record the 3 concerts and then they stitch it together. So even that is not exactly a live recording. Now, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Do we want a recording that's perfect? I know you do. You don't like breathing. I sent you one track of my duet thing and you're like, no, I can hear you breathing. It's like, I'm a human, I breathe. You're like, no, I'll clean it up for you. And it was like, it and it was really no better than hearing a person breathe.
It was just my first take of it, and I would have fixed it up more. But yeah.
No. Oh, what? You would have taken even more ambient noise out. Forget it. I'm not sending you any more. Anyway, so you're the purist. You want a clean recording. You only want sound, music. You don't want any air. You don't want any coughing.
Yeah, when
breathing.
It comes to recordings, I because unlike some musicians, and one of my best friends is this person, I actually listen to music for leisure. He's my friend, and I send him stuff all the time, and I just go, did you listen to that? And he's just like, no. And it got to the point where I'm just like, do you even like music? He's a stunning cellist. Do you even like... I sent him cello music. Do you even like music? He's like, that's a good question to ask now. And I sent him this one piece where, like, there's a big cello solo in this movement. And I'm like, we're going to your place. We are sitting down and watching this concert. And sure enough, when I got to the cello one, he was like, Anyway, what was I saying? Oh, yeah. I listen to it for leisure. So I'm really particular about types of recordings. It took me forever to find my favourite Tchaikovsky concerto and Sibelius concerto. That's not to say, by Vengerov, actually, performed by Vengerov. That's not to say, and Sophie playing it, or whoever played, it won't be a great performance, but when it comes to the one that I want to put on and listen to because I really just want to listen to that piece, the phrasing, the clarity, the actual quality of recording. You know, there's recordings from the 60s and you get the white noise and the crackling, and it's like, that's a cool recording to listen to for what they were playing like back then, but I can't have that in my recording that I want to listen to.
It distracts you.
And I have this funny story, right? You've heard of, obviously, Danish String Quartet. They did their last Leaf album. You can buy their sheet music, but... You should link that. It's absolutely divine. Yeah. But there's one piece that doesn't come in the sheet music, called Fastia, and it's this big cello movement. And they don't link it because when they recorded it, they recorded multiple cello lines plus organ drone. And
that's
it's
right.
like, we can't write that out because it's for quartet. So most people, it's not going to sound like that. And I've spoken with people that have had to arrange it in other ways. And I'm in the process of, when I stop being lazy about it, arranging it myself. But it's the classic case of, it's not going to sound like that recording because that recording's got multiple cello lines amongst the rest of the quartet plus organ drone. So they were like, we can't put that in there because it's not going to sound, people are not going to be able to play it. It won't sound like what they've done in that recording. So you have to get creative, musicians getting creative. If you want to play that particular piece, you have to, I don't know, dictate it yourself, transcribe it, and find a way to do it. But you know, but on the topic
of the clean versus dirty, let's say, recording, I grew up really, really loving the recordings of Jordi Savall. And Jordi Savall is a Spanish gamba player. You know that, I think, maybe. And viola da gamba, and he's a musicologist as well. So every recording he makes, it has a point to it. Like, he'll release a 4 CD extravaganza all about music in the 12th century or something. Like, He's just insane. He's released so many recordings. He has groups that they're all grey bearded dudes now because he's been doing it for decades and decades. And the complaint, if people complain about it, they're usually complaining about how when he goes on tour, he mics them up so that when you're in the massive concert hall, his sound guys make it sound like the sound is really close to you. So there's a lot of amplification on it because, you know, these instruments are really soft. He makes his recordings sound ambient and beautiful as if they're in churches because they actually are recorded in Spanish churches and so on.
Lovely.
So they are recorded in an authentic sort of way with authentic instruments, and they're very musicologically driven. So they're very, you can learn a lot about ancient music through Jordi Savall and his recordings. But at the same time, his recordings are so clean, they're so in tune. They really are through the lens of the 20th and 21st century in terms of chaos.
You're going to have to link it because this sounds really cool.
Oh, Jordi Savall's great. Just amazing, amazing music. But then you think those drums might not have been that in tune. The concept of in tune and perfectionism, those concepts are very recent concepts in terms of music. I might be cut down by early music people because there were a lot of tuning systems that were very meticulous back in the pre-Baroque, the Baroque period. All the different tuning systems, which we've lost now, and we just play in kind of a piano tuning system.
Equal temperament.
Yeah, all the different temperaments that there were. I don't know anything about it. I'm not going to pretend that I do, but the whole perfectionism of Jordi Savall recordings, the cleanliness of them, and the lack of chaos and experimentation within them annoys some people because the Renaissance especially was not standardized. It wasn't set in stone. There were all sorts of different weird instruments. Instruments were replaced with this or that, but Geordie Savile presents an idea which is clean, meticulous, and ordered. And so that's what some people don't like about Geordie Savile. But for me, I grew up listening to that sound of perfect recording studio, gorgeous, beautiful, not a hint of anything other than this pure viola da gamba sounds, these pure voices, no vibrato, the opposite of operatic voices. And so I love it, but I don't know how authentic it is, and I don't care because he is such an interesting person, you know?
Yeah, I mean...
But just to talk about the perfectionism in recordings, and I get the feeling that he wouldn't be doing many takes, but he would be rehearsing. And I know someone who worked with him, and apparently he is just so meticulous in rehearsals. So I can imagine the rehearsal process would be really long-winded, but the recording process
I
might be...
I saw a video of this ensemble rehearsing, and it wasn't anything serious, but it was just moments before they were going for a concert, and they were rehearsing, but it was just, we're going to hold this chord and it's going to be in tune. Oh, and I think you're a bit flat, and just holding this chord, not rehearsing the whole piece, not running their program before, it's just holding chords.
Yeah,
tuning.
Kind of calming maybe doing that, just finding a static way of preparing for a concert instead of just cramming quick, we haven't done this movement enough.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, I think, okay, that's all my sort of thoughts. I mean, I'm sure this could be a part 2 or whatever if something else pops up with this, but I don't know, the concept of recordings, I always go back to what are the students now, technology and social media, it's so, if you're not in the right, I don't know, if you're not in the right
it's really difficult for young people now because they're also really jaded and really cynical and don't respect authority anymore. So you've got this quadruple whammy of negative energy towards what they're doing, and they don't have any self-esteem about what they're doing too. So it's like, well, that's old school, I'm not going to follow that. But they can learn something from the old school as well, you know. You can learn something from everywhere. And that idea of learning, like, I want to learn, makes out like you don't know something, and no one wants to appear like they don't know something. So everyone's walking around pretending they're knowing everything, but actually knowing nothing, but too embarrassed to say, you know what, I think I want to learn. It's just a big dork if you say that, you know.
Yeah. But I mean, I can't fault people, but I do sort of get a bit like this when I see my peers and they're just aspiring to be these types of soloists, and it's like...
Your peers wouldn't go to concerts unless you made them go to concerts, actually. That's what I have found. There's not many of my students who are like you.
Flabbergasted. Like, I'm at a different level. Like, I get a message today, do you want to go tonight? Yes, I do. Oh, see you there. But I'm flabbergasted that, you know, this is a complete tangent, and I'm going to bring this up in a topic that we got planned in a few weeks' time about universities and students and stuff like that, that you are music students. You are studying your instrument.
Yeah.
You want to be, not necessarily in performance, but you want to be in this world, you want to know these people, you want to experience this, and you don't go to concerts. People work, people have other things on, fine. There's you don't have to go 3 times a week like me. I'm not saying that. Did I go? Yeah, anyway.
I mean, truly that is excessive. The amount of concerts you go to is actually excessive.
Guess what I found?
Hold it up.
My ticket.
That's right. And that's basically like listening to recordings, kids, although you're in the room.
Yeah. So there's this, right? And because of COVID, there was no more physical tickets or any concert. But last week was, and actually that was last year, back to tickets.
And do you notice how on the ticket, everyone, it does not say comp. It says $35. Annabelle actually pays to go to concerts.
That's a comp. That's a comp.
Oh, there's a comp.
Yeah. And if you look at the name up top, it'll say, oh no, it says operations, not Curro.
Oh, you know some other people in ops, do you?
But my point about this little tangent is, again, we're in Melbourne. It's just everywhere.
It's everywhere.
And if you want to take advantage of what's around us, and if you're a student of music and you want, like, it's why? And the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra, they give student tickets, so they're much, 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 much cheaper than normal prices, which is just a really nice handout. We want to fill these seats with students.
Yeah.
And again,
it's insane.
I'm off the spectrum because this is mainly 1 year. This is pretty much...
I like how you use the word spectrum. It's great.
Rachmaninoff 3. Anyway, so Alpine Sim. Okay, no, so that was just a little tangent.
Yeah, but on that note, go to concerts because it's like listening to a recording, guys. Just go to concerts.
Go twice.
Okay, so you all saw those tickets. That's like listening to recordings. Okay, admittedly, it costs a little more than maybe your Spotify or whatever, but do it. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the camera. That is, come and see us. We're really good.
But let's summarize just quickly recording.
Okay, you summarize
for this whole episode. Yes, no, yes again.
Absolutely. That's a standard splitting hairs summary right there.
We don't tell you what to think, but this is just what was on my mind this week. Peace out.
Yeah. Okay. There.